On a mission given to me by Woody Shaw, Sunship, Dizzy, and John Kahn, dedicated to pursuing a piece of our cultural heritage through interviews with my music heroes, this is the Jake Feinberg Show. Welcome everybody inside the Blackwood Broadcasting Studios at an undisclosed Institute of Higher Learning. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Thanks so much for being part of the program today. The hot banjo picking that came before my guests. Country-style picking by the likes of Bill Emerson and his Virginia Mountaineers, whose fingers were on fire playing rainbow blues. This music was cut in the moment. No multiple takes, just burn and pray. It was and always will be that way. Leap into the world of improvisation that led my guest today, who is another link in the chain. A chain that consists of Merle Watson, who along with Doc toured this country with reckless abandon, playing beer taverns and church picnics, and the Telluride Bluegrass Festival, singing about the days of wine and roses, with a return to forever and ever and ever. My guest has pierced through the modern labeling of music by continually putting himself in unique musical settings, knowing that he might flub a few notes, but create the highest creative art form, which is continual spontaneity, be it with David Matthews, or Zakir Hussain, Tony Trishka, or Abigail Washburn. Night in and night out, playing multiple choruses, like the fiddler Scotty Stoneman, who ignored the 12 bars because he had something to say. It's like Big Ben Banjo mastered by Rudy Van Gelder, or Paul Whiteman, or Eddie Peabody. How are you going to tell your story? How does your storytelling separate you from the 5 million other banjo pickers out there? My guest has many chapters and many stories in his career. Up till now, he has played with everyone from Stanley Clarke to Jerry Garcia, from Hobo Jim to his Flecktones. He has sought out new musical opportunities because music is the universal language, a cosmic exercise measuring the tenacity and spirit of both man or woman and their maker. Bela, Fleck, and Abigail Washburn, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Wow. That was the greatest introduction I've ever had in my life.
How about you, Abigail? I'm sorry, there wasn't...
outrageous. It was amazing.
I appreciate you guys. Thanks for taking the time. It was an honor. And it's so great to have both of you here. Bela, though, I just wanted to start with a question for you. I did notice that you're going to go on tour again in a duo setting with Chick Corea. And I was curious, in 1973, you were about 15 years old. Were you catching Return to Forever at that time? It's just mind-boggling to me that you wind up, you have to play with these guys, but yet at such an early age you were exposed. Did you get to see those cats play at that time?
I sure did. They changed my life. They honestly changed my life. Hearing Chick play. In fact, one of the things that made me think that playing jazz on the banjo would be possible was hearing Chick play the tune Spain with Return to Forever on a record at jazz appreciation class. I had just started playing the banjo. And just the way he played, especially it was that Rhodes piano sound, electric piano sound, and it was sort of crunchy, and he was on the front end of the beat like a banjo would be. But the language was completely different than anything I had learned on the banjo at that point. And so after hearing that sort of blew my mind musically, and then I got to go hear him play. And it was a formative moment for me, because when I watched him and his whole band playing all this crazy music, it just occurred to me that every note they were playing was on my banjo too, and I had to go find those notes. So for me, it's as trippy as you can imagine that I get to go out and play with Chick Corea. And we just finished a tour last week, and we have this next duet tour starting next week. So Pretty thrilling.
Yeah, no, it's, what's fascinating, I wanted to ask you, for some reason, these questions just kept flying into my head. Setting costs aside, would you guys ever consider bringing in a trap set? Because who are some, I guess it's a multiple tiered question here. It's kind of like, would you want to have a drummer, and who are some of the not steel drummers, but who are some of the trap set drummers that you've enjoyed playing with? Because it seems to me like that's ultimately what swings the band. But maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I think that the key, and one of the great things about Chick Corea, and one of the things that I've tried to do is make every musical combination possible a challenge. And so Chick, with the great stuff that he's done in duet settings with, for instance, with Gary Burton, just with piano and vibes, which he has a historic duet with, or with Bobby McFerrin with just vocal and piano, or duets with piano players. It's one of the things that he loves to do. And then he goes and plays in bands with drums, also. So, and I'm the same. I play in groups with drums, but like Zakir Hussain, for example, although he's not a trap player, he's one of the world's greatest drummers, or Future Man, or getting to play with Vinnie Colaiuta, or Jason Marsalis has really been fun to play with on a recent project. But I think it's really great, and it's powerful when the musicians have a strong rhythm and can present the music without drums too. And that's one of the things I love about acoustic music, and that's one of the things I love about playing with Abigail. What we're going to be getting into with this duet that we have, which is also a whole different kind of duet, but it also doesn't rely on percussion to make the rhythm. The rhythm comes from us, the timing comes from us, and it has a power because of that.
Abigail, how did you talk to me a little bit about your evolution playing the clawhammer banjo? I was down at a church in Sahuarita with a great hammer dulcimer player, Walt Michael, and I wound up talking to another cat, and it's killing me. I can't remember his name right now, but I sat down and did an interview with him, and he said his first introductory clawhammer class you were in.
Oh, really?
Yes, and I'll get you the name later. But here's my question for you: is how did you develop? You can't play live unless you have good rhythm. So how did you develop rhythm?
I think my sort of boot camp for rhythm came from playing with an all-girls string band called Uncle Earl, probably more in the vein of Bill Emerson and his Virginia Mountaineers type of band, a string band based on the old Appalachian fiddle tunes. And at the helm of our band in terms of instrumental music is the fiddler Raina Gellert, who is an incredible fiddler, and her sense of groove is just really really deep, and she led the way for the band in terms of creating the pocket that we all tried to form ourselves around. So that's really where I probably got my first schooling in rhythm and in groove was from playing in that old-time string band, I would say. And 5 years of doing that with 100 shows a year or something, that I learned a lot. I got into a good trancy place with it.
Yeah, no. Are there a lot of tapes circulating? I'd love to hear some of that stuff. I'm more familiar with this all-women band called Any Old Time String Band. That was more. They were hip. What I'm saying is, it's just so optically, it's so hip. You guys are coming to the Musical Instrument Museum. Have you guys been there before yet?
I have. Abby hasn't been there yet.
I mean, I think talk about how your sound, Bela, because you've seen the venue, obviously. You played in the venue?
I have. In fact, last year around this time, I did a couple of solo concerts there. They were some of my first solo concerts ever, and I love the venue. It's a wonderful venue.
And talk about, please talk about, I don't want to say expectations. A lot of times musicians, you guys don't go in with any expectations. You just let it go. But on this tour that you're going on, what are some of the things that you hope to open the audience's ears to?
Well, we get to play the coolest instrument in the world, so we get to open people's minds to the possibilities that just the banjo itself alone can offer. And that's one of the fun things about our show is we come out there with a pile of banjos, and that's it. So we have a baritone banjo, a cello banjo. Sometimes we carry a piccolo banjo or a bass banjo with us too, and then we have our our regular banjos, and we go back and forth with different sounds. And before the night, halfway through the night, it starts to occur to people that that's all they're going to hear is banjos, and they like it. And obviously Abby's one of the great voices, and so they're going to hear a lot of great singing on top, which does help. But they're going to hear a lot of different banjo styles, a lot of different. But that's not what we're presenting. We're not presenting a historical thing here. It's we're just trying to present music that we both feel passionate about and stuff that we feel that we can really deliver as a duo. What do you think, Abby?
I think it is a really unique opportunity for people to hear two banjos being played together. And I mean, honestly, Bela, anything you play on is going to sound spectacular. So I come into this.
Here's $100.
I don't. Let's not have a love fest just yet, okay? It's cool. Yeah.
But I come into this duo with very little trepidation because I just am fully aware that I'm playing with a master musician, not just a master banjo player. So when I come with a song or an idea for a song, Bela's got this incredible ability to flesh it out musically and conceptually, and then make it sound absolutely gorgeous on the banjo. So that was easy peasy coming into the project. The thing that's been really exciting is exploring the different ways the two banjos together can have a glorious water-like, trance-like sound, like a constant bubbling or a flowing. It's quite amazing because, of course, we have to produce a lot of notes in order to have sustain. I mean, because we don't have sustain, basically, on our instrument. It's like a pluck, with a little bit of a ring on it. So in order to have long notes to sing over, basically you have to continue a roll. And that's the charm and the beauty of the banjo is these different rolls that Bela and I play on our different instruments. And those two rolls interlocking, it can be really magical.
Bela, when was the first time that you went down to Nashville, and how did you connect? I just would love you to talk for younger generations, for my daughters and for future generations. I've done a huge amount of research on Vassar Clemens, but I would love you to talk about your relationship, how you met Doc and Merle Watson.
Sure. I moved to Nashville to join a band with Sam Bush and Newgrass Revival, John Cowan and Pat Flynn. And Sam Bush was the the longest member of the band. He was sort of the leader, although it was a very democratic group. And so when I moved to town, I wasn't moving to town to sort of be part of the Nashville mainstream. I was getting to be in a very progressive, modern group with deep roots in the bluegrass tradition, but not a bluegrass band, and while living in Nashville. So it was a perfect setup. And we went in and out of town. And one of the things I knew that was going to happen when I joined Newgrass Revival is I knew that I would be able to become friends with their friends, and that meant people like Doc Watson and people like Norman Blake and people like Hot Rise and people like John Hartford.
Right.
And so that was one of the great things about joining Newgrass is the whole world that they lived in, the community that they lived in. And so I remember I remember opening some shows for Doc, and Sam would sit in, and then gradually Doc would ask me to sit in with him as well. And so we would do an opening set with Newgrass, and then Doc had no problem following us as loud as we were. He would just come on and he would just command that room with his stuff. And then one of my proudest recording experiences was doing an album called Riding the Midnight Train, which was a whole album of Doc Watson's. It was like his bluegrass album of that period, and it was with Sam and with and Merle and Mark O'Connor and Jerry Douglas. I believe Jerry was on it. Maybe Jerry wasn't.
Yeah, I guess I listened to some of these live recordings and you're a veritable youngster. I mean, you were about 5 years into your career. I just would love you to talk about their stage presence and their ability to make you feel at that time. You obviously had technically, you were good and you were developing your own individual sound, but just could you talk about the intangibles that made these guys such, in my mind, these guys are the heroes. They're the ones that should be recognized. They're not, but you listen to them and you say, my God, I want to hang out with these cats.
Yeah. Well, Doc had that very personable way of relating on stage that made everybody feel like, wow, I love this guy, and the way he sang. And Abby should talk about that some too, because he's one of her biggest influences that made her want to play music in the first place. I was just lucky enough. But I mean, for me, I didn't get to play much traditional banjo, especially once I was in Newgrass Revival, and to be asked by Doc to be on his traditional album was one of the highlights of my sort of traditional corner of my career. But Abby was at his funeral and got to she had a transformative experience, like the same experience I had hearing Earl Scruggs play for the first time, where I had to go out and get a banjo after that. Abby had that experience listening to Doc sing and play the banjo.
Take us through that, Abigail. I didn't realize. Go ahead.
Well, I was a Chinese major in college, and I was obsessed with China and Chinese. I still am, and I had no intention of being a musician. But after all this time in China, I started questioning. I started just wondering what it was about America that could sort of measure up to the incredible cultural offerings that China has in terms of its 10,000-year-old culture, its amazing Taoism, Buddhism. The list goes on, all of the things that one can find if they start digging culturally in China. How could America compare? And I didn't really have an answer, and I wasn't much of a music buff either, but I was at this party in college, and I heard an LP of Doc Watson playing, and it was he was singing, playing Shady Grove on the banjo. And I heard it, and I was just really drawn to it, and I went out and I bought a banjo, and I wanted to learn how to play it and take it to China with me when I was going to head off there for law school. And before I did that, I decided I was going to learn some banjo. I was living in Vermont for a while, and that's probably where I met your friend. I was at this class with Dwight Diller up in Vermont, and I got my first understanding of clawhammer playing there. And never intended to be a banjo player and a troubadour for a living, but once I started playing music, I realized how powerful music is to heal and help people understand things without having to say a word. And that's when I realized I had to go to China and take the banjo with me. So really, my entrance into Doc Watson and the banjo was through this obsession I had with China, and I still have. But I got to open for Doc once, Doc Watson in New York, and I just loved it. I just sat at his feet and listened to him play guitar backstage, and he just was as sweet as could be.
And that's so. I mean, listen, I don't know these guys personally, but I feel it. And so what you're saying is true. Is love. I mean, they open their heart to you. Yeah. I guess I'm still trying to get my head around the idea of this connection between the banjo and China is still quite remarkable. My wife is Chinese, so
really?
Oh yeah, and so ni hao. Ni hao. But I here's the thing. You're right. They have Abigail. What in your mind do you feel like you said, these Buddhist traditions, Taoist traditions? So much true nature, so much. Spiritualism and storytelling, but have you been there recently? I mean, I feel like China's more repressed now than ever before. It's just changing so much, and that stuff's being held down. And I feel like in some ways, music. I mean, have you been back there recently? Can you comment on that at all?
Oh yeah. I go back about twice a year, but I haven't been back since I had my baby. But so it's been about a year and. It's been about a year and, I don't know, a few months since I've been there. Is there
a bluegrass scene? Is there a scene there?
No, there's not a bluegrass scene. But there is a strong lineage of traditional music on acoustic instruments there. You could call it string band music, but it looks really different. And I actually do have a string band with some female musicians that play the pipa, the guzheng, and the zhongran. And we love to play together, and it sounds great. I mean, it's like each of these acoustic instruments come from these folk traditions that tie back to the essential human need to find some way other than just the voice to express themselves. And everybody found these found objects like bamboo and hide heads and gourd bodies and wooden rims, and created these instruments, and they are just basically deeply related. They have the same grandmother and grandfather.
This is blowing my mind. Bela, do you go back and eat some spicy Sichuan food there with Abigail?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, no, I've gotten to go, I think it's 3 times now, and it's been a great experience every time. In fact, we even got to go to Tibet with the Sparrow Quartet and perform in Tibet, which was a curious experience. I think Abby's dead on that all over the world people build instruments that are pretty similar to each other based on what's around them, and that's how the banjo showed up. And there's instruments like the banjo in India and in China and
all over,
everywhere.
Yeah.
I have one of my partners here, a phenomenal bass player, Alicia Nichols, and she wanted to ask a couple questions of you, so I wanted to give her the stage here.
Hi, thank you very much. It's a true honor to be in any kind of dialogue with you both. I was, as a bass player, obviously, I had a question about your difference in working with Edgar Meyer versus Victor Wooten. I know that Edgar Meyer, as far as a composer, can write some really tricky meters, and you've been able to sight read through some really awesome pieces by him. Is Victor Wooten like that similarly, or is it, how does improvisation work and in your dialogue between both of those bass players?
Well, sure. Thanks for the questions and the compliments. They're very different players. I would say Victor, one of the primary drivers in Victor is groove and rhythm, and so everything in his playing comes out of this sort of embedded funk. So now there's nothing that Edgar could come up with that Victor couldn't play, or vice versa, but the way they approach music is very different. And Edgar comes from a very classical background, and although he has high appreciation and values funk, it's not his basic setup the way I would say it is Victor and Future Man's. It's in their DNA in a different way.
Sure.
And Edgar has a lot of different gifts, and one of them being composition, and just another being his technical gifts that he's putting in the time on the upright bass to do things that no one else can do.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people have put in that time, but they don't end up like Edgar. He's the only one who ends up like him.
Right.
And he has a grace with the bow that is, I'm not even going to say pretty much unparalleled. It's unparalleled.
Oh, yeah.
On the bass. Nobody has ever played like that I can tell, and nobody's even close. But Victor, he's the first guy to give it up to Victor when it comes time to do, the things that Victor does. They're very different. I'm very fortunate to get to play with both of those guys, I have to say.
Absolutely. It's phenomenal that you are able to work with both of those geniuses, and how it's just completely natural how both of them seem to have just perfect dialogue with you when playing. Abigail, I'm just starting to learn about you. In fact, I just saw your TED Talk this morning. Absolutely wonderful. And one less lawyer would not be a bad idea. Both of you, though, seem to have really amazing integration in world cultures, and something that differentiates between most cultures from the European-based cultures are these microtones that you see all over, Indian, Chinese, even it looks like some African music from the documentary when you went to Africa, Bela. Mm-hmm. Do you find that going forward with this new duet that you have series that you're working together, do you incorporate microtones in there more? Is there more of an international sound that you're generating from your knowledge of different cultures and bringing it into the banjos?
Well, we always start with microtones, but then we get in tune.
Ooh.
Sorry.
That's a banjo tuning joke.
Yeah, banjos are always out of tune. It's like when you tune a banjo, it's in tune for about a minute and a half. Okay. And then you're in the middle of the song and it's out of tune, and that's pretty much life. So we're always dealing with microtones in that manner. But really, no. I mean, and when I was in Africa, there was some microtonal music, and I'm thinking mostly of the marimbas and the instruments like that that were like they're set in between the pitches. You know, they're not on our pitches. Yeah. And so there was really nothing you could do. I mean, I can hear that through the phone. Yeah, you just had to play along and find like what it was that the octaves were in tune, but the notes in between weren't.
Right.
So sometimes there was nothing you could do except you could bend a note and try to get in there, but really just avoid a bunch of notes and find the notes that were close enough, and maybe just play the notes that lined up. Or you just don't worry about it.
Sure.
Because they weren't worried about it.
But do you think that you've expanded past the general pentatonic that a lot of people have kind of stereotypically used for imitating?
No, I don't think so. I think I'm pretty locked into, well, I would say the 12 tones, not the pentatonic, but the 12 tones. But getting in between those 12 tones, now that's something else. That's something Abby can do with her voice, and I know that she does that sometimes when she's singing some of these pitches. But I don't really do that with the banjo very much. Now, Edgar did some writing in between the pitches, and if you think about the bass and the tuning of the bass and how much space there is between a half step on an upright bass,
right,
you really can measure very easily the distance between a half step and break it up into smaller intervals. But that's a lot harder for us to do. You know, sure, you bend some notes. Some note like the third sounds good if you bend it a little bit. If you're playing some blues, or the seventh sounds good if you bend it, or the fourth sounds good if you bend it up a little bit. Those kinds of things. So those are microtones, but they're more conventional.
Okay.
Abigail, I wanted to ask you talk about how important it is to have your own individual sound in music and how that creates authenticity.
Authenticity is such an interesting word because it's like,
when I say it, I mean like when I interviewed Bill Cosby, he would talk about you could have put a blindfold on him in a club or put a record on, and he could tell you exactly who the drummer was, Tony Williams, Mickey Roker, didn't matter who it was. Everybody had their own sound, and that just means that you're being yourself. So when I say that, that's what I mean.
Gotcha. Yeah, I definitely think one way of being authentic is definitely to be yourself, and I think being yourself actually takes a lot of work and a lot of courage and a lot of letting go. My version of being myself is, especially when it comes to music and to my expression as an artist, is being okay with my limitations. And because I'm not trying to be something else or to be better at, I'm not trying to be Bela Fleck on the banjo. I'm really happy if I can just get in a nice groove and play an old-time melody over and over again and sing and sing to it. I mean, I am just really happy with my banjo playing if that's what I've done, is found this beautiful groove and good tone and a neat place to be in terms of the instrument. And then vocally, I am just drawn to the sounds of old America, old Ireland, old antiquity that shines through to contemporary times is what I'm really struck by, and I hear that in old recordings of the blues, of Appalachian ballads, of old hymns, gospel, black and white. All of that just really moves me. I heard it when I heard Doc Watson, and when I hear something I'm moved by, I try to incorporate it into my music. I try to sing it myself, and when I sing it myself and I sound different, I try not to think to myself I sound worse or I sound better. I try to think about the fact that I'm creating my own way of sharing what moves me with the world.
Yeah, but you're making it sound so simple. I mean, if I heard you correctly, you just picked up the banjo when you went to China. How long ago was that when you actually just decided, well, I'm gonna play the banjo now?
That was about 14 years ago.
Okay, so
like
you're somewhat of a somewhat of a veteran, but my
sophomore.
when you talk about limitation, I'm talking about I want you guys to reach younger generations. I'm talking about letting go. How do you I
think maybe the point that Abby's making is she's not a technical banjo player. Like I'm kind of a technical banjo player or a soloist. I'm an improviser and I play a lot of different kinds of music. Abby has more focused in on a fairly simple, but not overly simple, but a fairly simple style of expression that she feels very confident about. And she's saying that she doesn't need to be everything. She just really wants to be this one thing, and find her truest self in her abilities and her singing. And where I'm constantly trying to be something else. I want to be a classical player. I want to be a jazz player. I want to be and my ego and my my selfness is based in doing a lot of things, being, trying to be everything on the banjo that I can be, which is just we're just coming at it from different places, but we find we have a very easy way of coming up with common ground, which is just to go work on music together and find something we both really feel good about, where we can both be ourselves at the same time. And to me, that's what's interesting. Our duo, is we find ways to do the things that we both want to do, and they don't compete with each other in the slightest. Because Abby, what she does when she finds the center of what she wants to deliver, and then I get to paint over the top of it or look for ways to shade it, or to add to the rhythm, or to get beneath it with bass lines, or whatever we can figure out is needed. We're both doing exactly what we want to do as musicians, but it works together in a lovely way.
Well, we're talking to Bela, Fleck, Abigail, Washburn. This is quite a surprise. Your baby is enjoying this, or is he sleeping, or she sleeping?
Little Juno is our little boy.
Mm-hmm.
He's 10.5 months old, and he is awake, and he's outside playing with our friend Helen.
Oh, good. Okay, I was going to say he's really being good through this interview.
I know, right?
Bela, in preparation for the interview, I listened back to my conversation with Richard Green, violinist and fiddle, and part of Bill Monroe's Bluegrass Boys, and in the early '70s, which really was when you were coming into your own. Him and David Grisman put together. Well, they considered it new acoustic music with what they were doing in the essence of adding jazz aesthetics to traditional bluegrass instruments, and it was fascinating to hear him talk about it. But then I come across this thing called newgrass, and I'm like, I don't know if Bela came up. I don't think he came up with that term on his own. But do you think that's an apt term for what you do? And if so, what does that mean?
Well, there was all of these dialogue disputes. I don't know what else to call them, but newgrass is what they called the music that was created after Flatt and Scruggs, after the first generation, Bill Monroe, Flatt and Scruggs, Stanley Brothers. That was bluegrass, right? After that, people like the Osborne brothers showed up, and Jim and Jesse showed up, and they started having hits on country radio where they used, now we call those guys traditional bluegrass, but they weren't looked at that in the beginning. So they were looked at, that was called newgrass back then. And so when Sam Bush started the group Newgrass Revival in the 70s, he was actually trying to do a revival of modern bluegrass, as modern bluegrass was done like in the 50s, since real bluegrass started in the 40s.
Right.
So it's very ironic. So the term newgrass has been around for a long time, and it's a catch-all phrase. Now, David Grisman didn't really like the term newgrass because it had nothing to do with the music he was doing on the West Coast. Although he played on a record with Bill Keith called Something Old, Something Newgrass, and Something Old, Something Bluegrass, Something New. I can't remember,
right.
But newgrass was in the title. And he started his own music, which he called dog music, to sort of sidestep the whole problem of being called this or called that. And it was a real mixture of jazz, almost like a Django Reinhardt jazz and bluegrass, but without a banjo. So after all the guys in Grisman's band started to become a little frustrated, they didn't want their music to be called dog music too, because that was David Grisman's music. So that's when Darrell Anger came up with the term new acoustic music as a new catch-all phrase that hopefully would become, a more democratic phrase that wasn't attached to any one person, as dog music was, because that was Grisman's nickname. So
given to him by Garcia. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. No, but you're opening my skull right now, because you're telling me that Anger was the one that came up with, because it's all just, to me, this is just the most fascinating stuff. Anger was the one that came up with
I don't know, who, for all I know, Richard and he were talking and it came up, and I don't know who came up with it, but I'll tell you that Darrell was the guy who pushed it, and Rounder started to do a whole new acoustic campaign, and that was when the term really came into effect. All of these people knew each other. All these people were doing, largely the same thing. They were all creatures of the '60s who'd been, came into bluegrass, but had a much wider view of music, and so they needed some. It was going to come out. They were going to play like that, so they needed something to call it, and that became a problem sometimes, because someone who loved traditional bluegrass would actually get kind of torqued off at someone who was doing modern stuff if they tried to call it bluegrass.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to have a name almost to solve problems, And it didn't really get to the point where there was much of like a new acoustic section in record stores, not for long, maybe for a year or two. But it was a nice idea. It was an attempt.
Abigail, I'm sorry to ask you this question. How old are you?
I'm 483.
In dog years.
No, I'm 36.
Okay, so you're my age. Can you talk about your experiences even prior to playing the banjo, of going to see live music, and that being someone that receptively was taking it in, and now somebody who's actually expressing themselves musically?
Yeah, I did not grow up in a home that really went to see music or was particularly musically inclined. My brother did like to wail on the electric guitar in the basement, which was pretty sweet. And he did write songs, actually. No, he was quite musical. But I never imagined myself to be, and never really thought I would be, and I honestly didn't even go to see much music. That's the truth. I remember when Bela came to Colorado College to play, and it was a choice between Bela, and this was when I was in college, and Bela was just coming through with the Flecktones. I remember it was a choice between Bela Fleck and the Flecktones and a pan flute artist. And I went to see the pan flute artist.
Nice.
Oh, now you tell me.
I don't know. That wasn't really to support my point, but it's
a good piece of history. No doubt about it. It's great.
But I was dating a guy in college and for a while afterwards who was in a bluegrass band, and so I ended up selling merch at their shows, and I did end up getting exposed to acoustic music through that. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great, and I ended up singing some backup on some things, which was definitely my segue into this whole world. But I never intended to do that, and I never really went to see that many live shows until I was an artist.
And Bela, I was kind of just, I wanted you to talk a little bit about, is it fair to say that you came of age when the banjo popularity was on a massive upswing?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, Eric Weiss, I was reading these liner notes off this album with Eric Weisberg from the 60s, and I was reading about the doldrums that the banjo was in for many years.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, but Bela, when he came back, it was on fire. That's fair? That's true.
Yeah, well, that was right when, Dueling Banjos came out, and I was maybe 13 or 14, and when I was 15, my first banjo showed up mysteriously. My grandfather just bought one for me out of the blue, and that was right. So, yeah, Dueling Banjos was the hit record in the United States at that time, and, number one pop for 50 weeks or something. Incredible. So, yeah, a lot of people started playing banjo after that, and so I was into banjo already from hearing Earl Scruggs, which was had a more profound impact on me. But I loved hearing dueling banjos all the time too. Now at the time I did. Now when somebody says play dueling banjos, I'm not eager to play it. I guess we just all heard it too many times.
Yeah, no, the album that I have is with Marshall Brickman. The two of them.
New Dimensions in 5.
Yeah, see, I said this going into the show. I said that this cat Bela had a huge record collection. I know you did.
Oh, I had every banjo record that was out that you could find. And in those days you couldn't find some of the old stuff you can find now. So a lot of the banjo players, we all were hearing the same records. There weren't that many out there. Maybe there was 20 records you could find that had a lot of great banjo on them, and it was a smaller target back then. Now I think it's much, much harder to sort of focus in on what's going on.
It is, unless you're a freak like me that digs through Goodwills to find stuff on Star Day, with Don Reno and Red Smiley. But really though, you were seeing, going back to Return to Forever, or did you ever get to see Olden in the Way, by the way?
I did not. They were operating around the time I was starting, but so was J.D. Crowe in the New South with Tony Rice and Ricky Skaggs. In the first year or two that I was playing, that's about when they were going with that great band. So there was a lot of great music going on. I was impacted by Tony Trischka and a whole New York contingent since I grew up in the city, and those guys were all into playing, really space age wacko bluegrass. So the weirder the better.
Exactly. No, that's what I want to know from both of you. You can both take this on. It's about the weirder the better, isn't it? I mean, you don't want to lose the audience, but you have to do something that's going to differentiate and get their attention. Is that fair to say?
Well, no. I think it's more down to each person's personality, and it goes back to what Abby said about trying to be yourself. I mean, for those guys, it was being themselves. That was being themselves. They were a bunch of young New York guys with all their influences, and it was perfect for them to do the wackiest stuff they could possibly do. But, you know, that's not exactly what Abby should do. Like, she doesn't do Chinese songs because they're wacky. In fact, they're not wacky. She tends to do them in a very traditional fashion. And I don't really, I mean, I like shock value as much as anybody else, but I don't want that to be the main thing you walk away from my music with. I want there to be moments of, you know, of beauty, hopefully, and moments of uplifting qualities and peaceful moments, and then I want there to be, you know, a wide variety of emotions, as wide as possible, that I can create with the banjo.
Well, I got to tell you, it's how many nights? How long is this tour? And how long are you in one place for the longest time? I mean, do you have any back-to-back nights, or what's the tour like?
No, we are. The tour is going to start in Phoenix, and I actually have my brother and his wife and 3 kids. My niece and nephews are in Scottsdale, so we're going to go. I'm going to go spend the weekend with them beforehand, and our little guy Juno is going to meet them for the first time. So I'm really, really excited to get to Phoenix, and then we're going to be on tour for about a month after that, and we will not be in any one place for more than a night. I don't think. I think we have one day off in Santa Cruz. But we'll be traveling up the West Coast. So Santa Barbara, I'm going to be in L.A. for one night, but that won't be Bela and I together. And then Santa Cruz, Redding, Arcata, Grass Valley, Seattle area, Vancouver, Yakima. We've got a bunch. And then we're going to be flying to the East Coast from there to do Del Fest and in Cumberland, Maryland, and a couple of other shows in that area.
Bela, was there a period of time in your career where you would wind up in some town in Indiana or somewhere for seven night gigs, or maybe, you know, a residency where you would get to know the local characters, and all of a sudden, I think part of it now, I look at just your tour in general, it's one night here, one night there. There's no opportunity for real, like, you know, guys would go to McCoy Tyner would go to the Jazz Workshop in Boston for 7 days.
Right, and I got to do that a little bit on this last tour that I did with Marcus Roberts, where we would go to a jazz club in Seattle, or a jazz club we play at the Blue Note in New York, or, you know, and that is a lot of fun. It's fun to live somewhere for a while. But, you know, you played it for a smaller house, and you're away, you know, for much longer to make the same amount of money. I mean, I think this way that we travel, if we can get, you know, meaningful enough gigs and gigs that pay well enough for us to afford to take a tour bus out, we can travel with our little baby, and we can carry a nanny with us on tour, and get to play for a lot of people in a shorter time, and then get home, you know, which becomes important when you have a kid.
Absolutely. No, I know. I have too. I know that very well. I just, well, in closing, I just want to thank you guys for taking the time, and I wish you the best of luck on the tour, and just continue to grow, and just keep learning. I mean, and when you go back to China, let me know.
Okay, you got it. Yeah. Absolutely. Where is your wife from? She's
actually from Taiwan, but, you know, even her, she considers herself Chinese. I mean, the Taiwanese have been under the thumb of China for quite some time. So I've been back to I've never been to China. I've been to Taiwan, which is amazing, for, you know, 4 times. And there's a lot of spirituality there that is not, everything you read and see about China now is that it's either health issues, sanitary stuff, huge industrialization, and no time for I mean, it's not Mao, but there's something being tamped down because there's so much spiritualism. You know that. I mean, to me, and I'm going to get you the name of that cat that taught you the intro class. I'm bummed out that I can't remember his name, but he told me that about a month ago, which is kind of crazy. But Bela, Abigail, Washburn, thanks so much for being part of the program, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Jake.
All right, this is the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll see you all in a little bit.